Hey guys, so this video has been a long time coming, a few years actually. What I have not done yet is actually do a full-out tour and overview of this hammock that I made years ago, about probably 3 years ago now. It was back at a time I was gearing myself out, trying to explore everything there was about backpacking and, you know, pros and cons, different systems, and just really like opening up my eyes, expanding my horizons, so to speak, with all the options there is for backpacking and all that. And so as I got exploring the world of hammocks, I was fascinated. And there's so many systems out there. Seems like every company, outdoor company, has branded their own or producing their own style of a hammock. It seems there's that many hammock makers out there. A lot of them just, you know, lounging hammocks, but a lot of them really good manufactured hammocks for actual overnight camping. And there's forums dedicated to them, specifically hammock forums, most popular one out there. Lots and lots of information on there. I got into Derek Hansen and his Ultimate Hang book, and I think he's got a new version out now that I need to check out. But anyways, I was just fascinated with the idea of hammock camping and hanging in hammocks, and not knowing where to start or what to buy. But the systems that I was really intrigued by were out of my budget at the time. And so I started looking at the possibilities of making my own. And in my research of what looked like something that I could pull off as someone who had no sewing experience prior to this time, outside of a few little small projects in a home ec class in junior high, I had not ever touched a sewing machine. And I thought, well, my wife has a sewing machine. What can I do? Found a website called DIY Gear Supply. I do not think Ripstop by the Roll was up yet. If it was, I didn't know about it. But I did stumble into DIY Gear Supply. I think found out about that through some posts on hammock forums, and purchased a lot of material there. So in researching all these hammocks I could potentially try to make myself, I stumbled into a hammock called the Switchback, made by a cottage company called Tree to Trail, I believe, or Trail to Tree, one of the two. But yeah, so I was really intrigued by it because it had a lot of features, and again, I would have bought it outright, but I did not have it in my budget. So as I was exploring the options of making one myself, the Switchback really stuck out to me as one. I could found enough pictures, and at the time there was a video or two on YouTube, one really good one that was on YouTube. It doesn't seem to be up anymore. Anyways, I found enough information on that it looked like a simple enough design that I could probably try to pull it off, making one myself for about half the cost of buying one. And so that's what I tried, and got my wife to show me how to use her sewing machine. Got on DIYgearsupply.com, got materials I thought I'd need, at least most of them. I think I sourced a few minor hardware parts and other things from Dutchware Gear through some of his DIY gear stuff. And so anyways, I want to take a few minutes here and just actually highlight some of the features of this hammock that I made, again, patterned after a Switchback. And this, I am proud to say, is my first and only, well, I shouldn't say only, sewing project. It is my first major sewing project ever, and again, my first real piece that I ever sewed since a home ec class where we did just some very small things like hot pads and a windsock and maybe something else small like that in a home ec class in junior high. So after having my wife teach me how to use a sewing machine, I practiced a few stitching and kind of getting a feel for it on a few scrap pieces of cloth, piecing those together. I kind of diagrammed this out and just studied pictures really hard and thought things through in my head, and with minimal mistake. I was very excited at the turnout of this hammock, and more excited that it has not broke yet. I have hung on it numerous times now and had it out on various trips and camping trips. I've had it up in the Uintas, popular mountain range here in Utah, not far away. I've had it down in my in-laws' place in southern Utah several times, and I've had it up here in the Wasatch Mountains a few times. So I've definitely camped in it a handful of times each year over the last 3 or 4 years since I've had it. And so now I'd like to just take time to show off some of the features of it with it being set up here. Here's a quick look at it all set up. And so first off is the bug knot. We'll check the bug knot out here. It is a two-sided zipper here. So two-way zippers on both sides. So the idea behind the name of a switchback is that you can switch it. It switches back either way. So everything on one side can be mirrored on the other side. Come around the other side. Do the zippers here. And then what this allows me to do is I can, I've got a Ridgeline up here. It's a non-structural Ridgeline, which means it's got a lot of slack in it. It actually runs off bungee cord. And then another little guy line here, some glow wire I have just tied off at the Marlin hitch here at the suspension. Same thing on the other side. And this is actually held up with D-ring. I used polyester strapping, and I shouldn't have. I should have just used some, going back and looking closer pictures, it looks like the original makers of this hammock, they actually used Grosgain. So if I were to do this again, I would just use Grosgain here. I found out that sewing a bunch of that polyester webbing together with our sewing machine, it didn't like it too much, but at least it got it through. So with the bug nut all unzipped, I've got a couple little bungee loops with the little cord locks. That cord locks may not be necessary, but I use them as little toggles, and they will hold the net together around this ridge line here. And so I'll demonstrate that here real quick. So with the net up, as you can see, it kind of, the ridge line there kind of holds it out of the way there, and so you can kind of lay there and enjoy the night sky if bugs aren't a problem. The net is, of course, sewn into the gathered end channels here, so the zipper, it does not zip off in any particular, or it does not zip off on either end, so it does have to stay up like this. Alright, so let's look at the body of the hammock a little bit. It is a double layer. So what I did is I sewed in a few pieces of Velcro, about 3 on each side, about equal distance apart. And you know, if I were to do this again, I'd probably do what's typically done, and that would be to like sew one half of the side and maybe come down to the opposite half of the other side and sew those in, and then that would leave me a good sleeve to insert the sleeping pad in. So, but it works, you know, so far it works all right. And the only problem is this fabric is so thin that it is starting to stretch out a little bit away from the stitching where some of this Velcro is. It's more noticeable in some spots than others. Now the sleeping pad I like to use is ultra light. It's extra large auto shade for your vehicle, and I haven't had any major issues with like it becoming a vapor barrier and causing a bunch of condensation under me, but it does keep me plenty warm in most of the spring through fall temperatures. And so I will just make sure one corner gets lined up on the edge where my feet go, and the other corner goes up by where my head and left shoulder goes, so that it runs along the diagonal there for me. A few other little points. It is just a typical gathered in hammock. I've sewed up, looped up some end channels, stitched those in, and then ran my continuous loop here. I've got it suspended on an aluminum ring here on either end, and then I've got my whoopee sling attached to it, lark's head on the other side. So, and that aluminum ring just kind of provides a little bit of a rain barrier. If any rain wants to follow this line, it'll should break at the ring here. On the head end, I'll often tie in or strap up my pillow, usually stuff in a stuff sack or something that has an attachment point that I can then carabiner that onto here, and that way the pillow just sits in place, kind of always there where I want it, with just enough slack to position it under my head where I need it, but otherwise it kind of stays in the area I want it without losing it down under the sleeping bag or the quilt that I'm under when I get out. One other feature, by the way, is I do have a bishop bag as a stuff sack here. So I sewed this up myself with some sil nylon material I had purchased. So that's when I really got into like sewing some stuff, is did a few different stuff sacks, and this one ended up being just large enough to take in the whole hammock. And so I punched through a little grommet, and that allowed me to put the continuous lip through there, and voila, I've got a bishop bag to store my hammock in. So here's a look with all 4 lines staked out. So you can see it does spread out the hammock a little bit, gives you that much more space under the bug net there. One other cool versatility feature about this is the ability to invert it without, you know, as long as you don't or you keep the clothesline or the ridgeline for the bug net tied up. It's suspension tied up like so, just like it is when you pull it out of the bishop bag. And you invert it so that the bug net faces down. Then it just becomes a typical lounging hammock. You can just lay in there with nothing above you and just enjoy the clear skies. And you can set this up, you know, on the side of the trail if you're just wanting to set up a chair, or take a quick little nap, or take it to the park and just enjoy it at a park for a little lounging hammock. So alright, so we're all zipped up, bugs are out, and this is kind of a look at the headspace inside. So just enough space, headspace inside to sit up without any ridgeline or the net hitting you in the head here. I mean, the net will brush up on the head a little bit, but ridgeline's out of the way, so it's nice to kind of sit up. You can do some reading in this position if you want, sitting up or what have you. So with this non-structural ridgeline, or clothesline as it can be called, I can adjust its tautness and tension with these cord locks. I've got one on either end, and I can just pull it tighter, and that'll make it a little stiffer and raise the net up a little more. If I want the net a little looser or lower in profile, I can loosen it up and the net will drop down a little bit. But usually, and it kind of depends on how far apart the trees are, and will depend on how tight I need to adjust this ridgeline to support the net high off the face. The other thing, it is sturdy enough to hold lightweight objects. I can hang a small, headlamp, small flashlight off of it. I can hang, socks off if I got wet socks to dry. Something else I like to do sometimes is I can actually secure my phone on it and sit there and watch videos or a movie with just rubber bands. I can secure that on there, and then we've got a hands-free video screen there. And yeah, so that's kind of the look on the inside. A lot of awesome features. Again, got the storage pocket up here, got that on this end, another one down on the other end. Kind of gets used for more gear that I don't need quick reach to, if I use it at all. The one thing I don't like about this hammock, and maybe it's just in hammocks in general, is the foot area seems to want to compress my feet together and my ankles there. I don't have much issue with like really bad calf ridge. It should be long enough to get a good wide diagonal lay, but for whatever reason it still wants to collapse my feet on themselves, and it just gets them tingling after a while. It's just not as comfortable. So I mean, of course I can kick my knees apart a little bit, but I find if I want to keep my legs both stretched out or extended, to keep my feet comfortable, I need to put like some kind of pillow or cushioning under my knees, and that allows my feet to kind of rest in a neutral position without being compressed into each other. For whatever reason, this hammock in the foot area wants to push those feet together. Another thing that makes this hammock so versatile is its ability to go to ground when you don't have any good trees or any trees at all. It's pretty easy to pitch on the ground, like so. Just have my trekking poles. I kind of set them as short as they go there, and put the ridgeline loop up through there, and then stake that out down below like so. And then I use my little side tie outs and stake those out just to spread it out. Do the same on the other end, on the other side. And yeah, of course I would usually put a little ground sheet, like Tyvek cloth under there if I was actually sleeping in it and camping in there. I have slept in there once this way when I camp out with a friend up a mountain, and had trees I could have hung in, but we wanted to sleep out in the meadow and wake up with the wide open view around us. And I am thankful that I did set this up as a bug bivvy, because man, the mosquitoes were horrendous. So it definitely works well. And then of course, if you're expecting inclement weather, it wouldn't be hard to move the poles out further and pitch a tent or a tarp, pitch a tarp over in an A-frame style. And then yeah, you'd have your protection from the rain. Then you just shimmy on in through the side zipper there, and that's the go to ground mode. Alright, so you can take a look at the tech specs on the hammock here, the materials I used, and the dimensions. And so I'll start off with the material used here. Again, I got most of this material from DIY Gear Supply. This is 1.1 calendared ripstop nylon, coyote brown color I believe it was. Really love this color. And this was seconds, so that made it that much cheaper. And then because I was going to do a double layer hammock, I wasn't worried about the integrity of the seconds. So I also had a layer of green forest green, also 1.1 calendared ripstop nylon, seconds also, and use that as my interior layer to make it the double layer. And then of course I've got a layer of no-seam mesh for the bug net here. And the dimensions, originally, the widest I could get the fabric was 50 inches. So just a little bit over 4 feet to start. And then lengthwise, before I rolled up the end channels, was about 10.5 to 11 feet long. Can't remember exactly. I want to say 11 feet, but somehow end up quite a bit shorter than I thought it would be after my end channels were made. So we'll come back to that in a second. So first step was, of course, just to layer all 3 layers of the material together. And then I started off by, of course, hemming the edges of my interior layer here, and then I hemmed over the edge of the exterior, the outer body of the hammock here, and included a strip of I want to say 1 inch or 1.5 inch grow gain here, and included the lower level of the zipper on that. And then I added the other section of zipper, of course, to the edge of the bug net, and then attached the zipper here, one on this end, the other one on the other end. Once all those edges were all stitched together and hemmed up, ready to go, that's when I rolled over, hemmed and rolled over the end channels here. And they're about 2.5 to 3 inches wide, and I've rolled them up over 3, maybe 4 times. Width-wise, with the hems together and the zippers on, it comes out to be about 48 inches, so 4 feet long, or 4 feet wide. Other than that, it's just a basic rectangular hammock. No fancy cuts, foot boxes, anything like that. So also included on either side, opposite ends, was a little gear pocket, as I showed earlier. That is, you know, I think I made it about 10 inches wide by about 8 inches deep or so, something along those lines. Just kind of eyeballed it to what looked good, and then of course double layered that to make the pocket, and then that was also inserted into in between the zipper and the exterior layer of fabric there, the bottom layer. And so I did that on the other side, of course. I showed these D-ring straps. That was sewn into the end channel there, so I could have these little way of hooking up a pillow or a peak bag into the each end of the hammock. So that's that. And then also on the bug net, showed off, there's a D-ring strapped in and sewn to another strip of polyester webbing with D-ring underneath the fabric there, and that gives me my ability to suspend and lift the bug net up with that little clothesline ridgeline in there. Nothing too fancy, and just had to make sure I had my edges aligned really well and pinned together, and just really careful with the stitching as I ran it through the sewing machine, or a thread injector as a lot of people like to call it. I think what everyone is waiting to know is, how much does this thing weigh? Well, when I put the continuous loops back through the end channels and the little aluminum rings that I've got going on them, and then my Dynaglide whoopee slings, all together that all weighs 2 pounds, or 2.03 pounds. So a little bit on the heavier side of other options out there. Again, because this is a double layer and I've got all this extra hardware with the D-rings. Oh yeah, I did forget to point out that in between the grow gain and the bottom layer were the tie outs here as well. So yeah, I've got extra, that adds to the weight, a little bit of polyester webbing, D-ring on each of them. They are plastic D-rings, but with 2 of those on each side, I want to say I came in about 3 feet off the edges, or closer to 2.5 feet from the edges with the end channel there. So they came out to a nice place. But anyways, back to the weight. It is a little heavier with all the added hardware and webbing and the 2-sided zipper and the extra layer of hammock to make it a double layer. That does push it just over 2 pounds with the whoopee sling suspension added on. But still not bad. Compare it to comparable options manufactured elsewhere. They use a little bit heavier, more durable fabrics, and with all these features on this hammock, you're getting well over 2.5 pounds and beyond with something manufactured with heavier weight fabrics. So, alright guys, so I think I covered all the primary features of the hammock here with that tour there. So again, switchback hammock, the ideal is you can switch back any direction you want and basically have the same experience with it. You got the 2-way zippers. You can open up and get out either side. With the anchor cords here, you can spread it out any direction, and you can spread it out the diagonal way, with your head on the right and your feet on the left of the ridgeline, or left of center. Or again, traditional lay, feet right of center, head left of center there. Putting it up is pretty easy process. Here's a look at the takedown, which is the opposite of putting it all up.